I cannot emphasize this enough, in that the last supreme leader was chosen upon the death of the first supreme leader, but it was during peacetime. It was at the end of the Iran-Iraq war. This is coming about during a active kinetic action.
And in the high-stakes world of Middle Eastern geopolitics, few transitions are as consequential or as shrouded in secrecy as the succession of the Iranian supreme leader. Following the death of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei on February the 28th, the Islamic Republic has entered its most volatile period since the 1979 revolution. To discuss the succession of the Supreme Leader, we're joined by Ross Harrison, Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute and author of the recently released book, Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. Ross, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. There's no election involved here, is there, Ross? What is going on behind the scenes? What is the framework here for the next Supreme Leader?
Well, there is a process that has been put in place, and it was put in place prior to the last succession we had of Supreme Leader, which was in 1989, when the founder of the Islamic Revolution, Ruhollah Khomeini, died. And then there was set in motion a council called the Council of Experts. So there is actually a voting that takes place. There's no public available. There's no public voting. But there is a process for this Council of Experts, and it's designed to both govern the succession process, and if there is a problem where the Supreme Leader is incapacitated or they're charged with the duty of choosing a next Supreme Leader. Now, it's never really happened because the last Supreme Leader, Ruhollah Khomeini, chose his successor and then put the Council of Experts into motion. So it's a machinery that operates but really has never been tasked with the duty of actually choosing a new Supreme Leader. Now that council is now, in theory, has been meeting. But this is wartime. And so you mentioned in your lead up that this is a process that is probably shrouded in secrecy, and that's certainly the case. So we really don't know exactly how the process is going to work. My hunch is, knowing a good bit about how the Islamic Republic works, is that the Revolutionary Guards, the IRGC, the Iran Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, will be instrumental in choosing the next Supreme Leader. And the council, how the council will work, again, we know how constitutionally it should work, but we don't know necessarily how it's going to work, because I cannot emphasize this enough, in that the last Supreme Leader was chosen upon the death of the first Supreme Leader, but it was during peacetime. It was at the end of the Iran-Iraq war. This is coming about during a active kinetic action.
Under the pressure of war. Do we know if the assassinated Supreme Leader Khamenei chose a successor? Do you suspect that he would have made that choice? And who is the most likely choice if that was the case?
Well, he did it by omission. In other words, he disqualified his own son, Moshtaba Khamenei, who is now the most likely candidate, if we can believe the press.
Yeah. So,
he's the most likely.
So why did the former Supreme Leader dismiss Mojtaba?
Because his view was he didn't want a monarchical dynasty. He didn't want to have a repeat of the dynasties of the Shahs, which were in effect a dynasty. So were there other reasons? We really don't know. It's fairly opaque. But there were a few other candidates like Arafi and Iji. There are a few other candidates that were in the mix, but he did not designate a successor at the time he had not designated a successor at the time of his death.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how Mojtaba is in contention, probably the lead contender at the moment. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, he is the second son of the slain Supreme Leader. He was working in the office, or some would say governing the office of the Supreme Leader behind the scenes. He's more than likely, since his wife and his mother were killed along with his father, and given his history of having worked with his father, he's likely to be a hardline candidate. And that's probably why during wartime he is favored by the Revolutionary Guards. Now, there are other candidates that would be perhaps more pragmatic, like the former President Rouhani or Ayatollah Arafi. But it seems like, if we can believe what we're hearing, and that I have to caution your listeners and your viewers that we can only speculate that what the information we're getting is accurate. If we believe what we're hearing, Mojtaba is the designated one, or the favored one. But that could be a ruse. That could be a ruse. And we might see in the coming days somebody else emerge because of the threat of assassination.
I'm pretty sure that we've heard from either Israel or the US or both that whoever is the successor or the intended successor, they then immediately become a target. It sounds obvious to say, but that is that ties into a little bit about what we heard earlier on from the United States at the beginning of this war about regime change. The closest that they'll get to that is not necessarily to help the Iranian people, but just to make sure that there is no leader appointed as far as they can. Ali Larijani, Secretary of the Supreme National Council for Security. He's a veteran politician, but he's been in and around a lot of what we've heard from Iran. Tell us a little bit about him and his significance.
Well, he's not qualified to become supreme leader because he's not a cleric, but he has certainly been a powerful force working with the former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and working with the Revolutionary Guards. And he and President Pezeshkian, the elected president, are, in fact, we believe, operating and governing to the degree that the current government under siege can operate. They're basically operating and making decisions.
Yeah, so he's a de facto leader in sort of.
He's a de facto leader, but he will not become the supreme leader.
Yeah. Okay. And President Pezeshkian's also involved in that, as you say. Who's now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but my understanding and my dealings of stories about him have been that he's always been a little bit more moderate. He's always seemed to be more on the side of keeping the Iranian people unified. I mean, this is what comes out of Iran. Who knows? But is there coherence, I suppose, in these de facto leaders?
Well, you meant Pezeshkian or Larijani?
Yes,
which one?
Pezeshkian.
Yeah, I've actually met with President Pezeshkian. Yeah, I mean, he was elected on a reformist slate. Now, what does that mean? That means that he had to be vetted by the Guardian Council. So he's not really a true moderate, we would say, but he was considered a pragmatic leader. And my sense of having met with him and having seen him operate during the last few months, yeah, I wouldn't call him a moderate, I would call him a pragmatist. Now the question becomes, what does that mean in the current climate? Because this is a government that could be gone tomorrow. So how they're operating and what does it mean to be a pragmatist at this point in time, we just don't know. I think everything is really up in the air and we have to be very cautious in making any kind of prediction.
That's what's going on, obviously, within the idea of the Iranian regime continuing. Has to be a cleric, as you said. Has to sort of fit that historical example. Let's talk a little about Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah, because certainly at the beginning of the year. And he's continued to be in people's conversations at the moment. There is a thought that he will, given the opportunity, go to Iran. And his only desire, he says, is to be an interim leader before a proper democratic vote can take place. Is he still in and around this? What have you been hearing about his movements? What opportunity he is going to seek and when?
Well, I mean, in terms of the process that we've been talking about up to this point, which is basically what's the choreography going to be within the current regime? He's not a player, obviously.
No.
Hasn't been in the country for 47 years. So under what conditions could he possibly play a role?
Yeah.
It would require a
come out of exile for that, by the way. Yeah.
Well, right. You'd have to have an implosion of the regime. And that is not the most likely scenario. The most likely scenario is some kind of reorganization within the existing regime, or if the conflict goes on long enough and there are further assassinations, you might see somebody from within emerging to form a new type of government from within. The scenario you mentioned, which is that Reza Pahlavi would come back, would require, frankly, a complete implosion and fanciful thinking, because this man has an organization in the United States and he has a support base principally in the diaspora, those Iranians that are living in the United States and living in Europe. Mm-hmm. He has some support indicated by the protest last month, or in January rather. He has people. There's awareness of him. But the conditions under which he would have to come back would have be some kind of a managed transition. And unless there are boots on the ground by outside powers, which I don't see happening, I don't see the conditions to get from where he is today into some type of leadership without some kind of managed transition. And there's no organization on the ground that we know of that could help him manage a process from coming from exile into power. So is it a possibility? Any scenario right now is a possibility, but it's probably the least likely scenario.
Yeah, got it. Look, thank you so much for walking us through that. Ross Harrison, Fount of Information, thank you. Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute, author of the recently released book, Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy. Good to speak to you, Ross. Thank you.